There comes a quiet moment in life, a shift so subtle it rarely announces itself. Not through chaos, not through some dramatic confrontation, but through silence. A silence that settles in like dusk before nightfall. A job that once lit you up slowly becomes a prison of routine. A relationship that once sparked with laughter begins to echo with unspoken words. A dream that once pulled you forward now feels like a weight you carry, not because it lifts you anymore, but because you don't know how to let go. And the world, in its quiet indifference, says nothing. Life never sends a signal saying, "This is it, it's time to move on." It simply fades, one subtle moment at a time. The mornings become harder. The air grows heavier. The rooms you once entered with ease now resist your presence. Joy becomes a task. Purpose turns into repetition, and yet we stay. Not because it feels right, but because it's familiar. We tell ourselves to endure, to persist, to give it one more chance. But deep down, something shifts. This is precisely the kind of moment the Stoics trained for. Not with panic, not with fear, but with steady awareness. They didn't wait for breakdowns to make decisions. They noticed the whispers. And instead of clinging, they prepared to release. They understood something many forget: attachment isn't indifference. It's clarity. It's seeing the situation for what it truly is, not what you hope it could be. To walk away isn't to escape. It's to honor what your inner voice has already been whispering for weeks, months, maybe even years. That voice, quiet but insistent, telling you that the season has changed, that the path you're on is no longer yours to walk. And this, the Stoics knew, was not failure, it was strength. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, all spoke in their own way of the noble exit, of the power it takes to say no more, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. In a world that confuses exhaustion with virtue and sees staying too long as proof of character, the Stoics offered another path, one that recognizes that not all persistence is brave. Sometimes it's just fear dressed as duty. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is leave, not with anger, but with clarity, not with noise, but with grace. To walk away is not to abandon. It is to discern. It is to know when something is no longer aligned with your values, your growth, your peace, and to have the strength to step away, not because you gave up, but because you finally chose truth over illusion. This is the art of leaving well. And in this video, we won't just talk about walking away as a decision. We'll explore it as a spiritual act, a discipline, a map for when your soul knows what your mind is still trying to deny. Because sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from fighting to stay. It comes from learning how and when to walk away. In the quiet spaces of our lives, long before the noise fades or the cracks begin to show, there is always a signal, a shift, a feeling. And if you're still with me now, then you're ready not just to see it, but to feel it. This next part of the journey isn't about drama. It's not about slamming doors or burning bridges. It's about reading the terrain of your own soul, feeling the subtle currents before the storm, knowing when the winds of your spirit have changed direction before the world even notices. This isn't about escape. It's about intention. It's about preparing your inner world mentally, emotionally, spiritually for a decision that isn't made in fear, but in truth. When we learn to leave without bitterness, without confusion, and most importantly, without regret, we unlock something that few ever master: the quiet courage to choose and not react. Chapter 1. The Stoic Compass, Knowing Your North. Before you can decide when it's time to walk away, you must know where you're walking toward. Because if you don't have a north, you'll wander in circles, chasing validation, clinging to patterns, confusing endurance with purpose. The Stoics were clear about this. Virtue and not comfort, not status, not pleasure is the true good, not wealth, not popularity, not even success as the world defines it. but the steady inner alignment of your actions with what is right. That, they said, is the only thing worth protecting at all costs. And so your compass isn't out there, it's in here. It's the small voice that says, "This isn't worth my peace." The quiet recognition that this place, this job, this relationship no longer aligns with who I am. Marcus Aurelius captured it best. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. But he didn't mean force your way through everything. He meant confront it and ask. Ask, is this resistance here to make me stronger? Is it telling me to change direction? Is this pain a necessary trial or a red flag I've been ignoring? To walk away with wisdom is not just about leaving, it's about knowing deeply who you are. The Stoics believed we all have a daimon, an inner guide, a divine whisperer that gently nudges us when we start to drift from ourselves. That nudge might be subtle, a tension in your chest, a loss of joy, the growing sense that you're shrinking to fit a space you've outgrown. You feel it most when you're still, when the noise dies down, when you stop numbing yourself with distraction, and finally allow the silence to speak. It comes not with explanation, but with presence. Not with logic, but with resonance. Like slipping on a shirt that no longer fits, everything feels tight, wrong, restrained. That's the moment, and many ignore it. They convince themselves it's just a phase. They rationalize discomfort, minimize their unhappiness. But the Stoics? They trained for that moment. They meditated on impermanence, reflected daily on death, not to live in fear, but to stay honest, to not waste another breath in a life that isn't theirs. Because clarity doesn't come from routines or titles. It doesn't come from staying busy. It comes from honest self-examination, from asking, what kind of person am I becoming by staying here? What values am I affirming just by continuing to show up? What am I sacrificing just to stay comfortable? And then, the real question, do I have the courage to act on what I know? Hearing the whisper of your daemon is just the beginning. Honoring it is the first step toward freedom. But real change demands action. It requires movement, and that's where most get stuck. Because the mind clings. The ego resists. We tell ourselves the discomfort will pass. But the Stoics warned, the longer you ignore misalignment, the louder the internal conflict becomes. Until one day, you no longer recognize the person staring back at you. To walk away in truth is to disrupt comfort in service of your values. It's saying yes to authenticity, even if it means saying no to acceptance. It's choosing a rugged, uncertain path that brings you closer to integrity over a familiar path that makes you smaller. This isn't running away, it's returning to yourself. It's the moment you stop betraying your soul just to make others comfortable. And when you do that, when you reclaim your energy from places, people, and patterns that no longer serve you, every step becomes an act of devotion. Devotion to who you are, to who you're becoming, to a life built not on habit, but on truth. A life that doesn't just look right from the outside, but feels right on the inside. So, here's your task. Write down the 5 values you will not compromise. The 5 truths you would rather walk away than betray. Keep them close. When life grows murky, when doubt whispers and the old comfort calls return to them, let those values be your compass. Ask yourself again and again, does this life still reflect them? If not, then you already know what to do. Chapter 2. The Courage of Letting Go. What comes after the whisper? After the moment you realize you've outgrown something but still feel the weight of staying? This is where the true test begins, not of endurance, but of courage. Because walking away is not simply an act, it's a reckoning. We live in a culture that glorifies holding on. We turn it into poetry, turn suffering into songs, turn unhealthy loyalty into badges of honor. We're praised for staying in places that drain us, in jobs that hollow us, in relationships that cost us pieces of our soul. But the Stoics, they saw something different. They didn't honor suffering for its own sake. They honored courage. And not the dramatic, battle-worn kind, but the quieter kind. The kind forged in silence. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. It's the courage to quietly get up and leave the dinner table when the conversation turns toxic. The strength to leave a job that no longer reflects your values. The integrity to walk away from someone you love deeply because staying would mean losing yourself completely. This kind of bravery isn't always visible. It rarely comes with applause. But in the Stoic worldview, it's among the highest forms of strength. It's the unspoken decision made in the middle of the night. It's the quiet, no more whispered when no one is watching. And often, it's the only thing standing between a person and a lifetime of slow erosion. Because what the world may call giving up, the Stoic recognizes as something far more sacred: discernment. The ability to sense when something has ceased to serve your growth and begun to corrode your spirit. That's the courage they celebrated, not the one that shouts, but the one that walks away in peace, not the one that demands to be understood, but the one that chooses clarity over chaos, truth over tradition. The Stoic needs no audience, no justification. All they need is inner alignment, that stillness that says, "This path is no longer mine." And this courage does not shake fists or demand validation. It radiates calm. It is silent, but it is fierce. It is the kind of courage that protects peace instead of chasing approval. Because in the Stoics' eyes, there's no virtue in clinging to what diminishes your integrity. They knew endurance is only noble when it serves the good, not when it feeds fear or ego. Real courage means knowing when to stand your ground and when to release it. It's understanding the fine line between grit and grace. Between staying because it's right and staying because you're afraid to leave. And let's be honest, it's easier to stay, to bury the truth, to tolerate, to hope, to endure. It's easier to tell yourself it's not that bad than to face the tremble of change. But the Stoics saw right through that illusion. Sometimes, what we call loyalty is actually avoidance. What we call resilience is fear in disguise. True strength, they believed, isn't found in how long you stay. It's found in how honestly you examine your reasons for staying. To leave with clarity demands far more than to stay in confusion. And that's the kind of self-confrontation the Stoics considered heroic. Not flashy, but transformative. Not easy, but essential. Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us, and some are not." And this single truth, it changes everything. It separates the courageous from the compulsive. Because the longer you try to control what doesn't belong to you, someone else's behavior, perception, apology, the more of your own peace you surrender. And time slips through your fingers. Time, the most sacred possession, the one thing you can never buy back. And yet, how often do we waste it? Hoping, fixing, justifying. When all along, the answer wasn't to try harder. It was to release. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about giving yourself back. Your energy, your clarity, your self-respect. Walking away isn't about rejecting people. It's about remembering who you are. It's about protecting the sanctuary of your spirit from environments, expectations, and patterns that no longer belong. To the Stoic, your life is a sacred trust, not something to be bartered for comfort, not something to be edited for approval, but something to be lived fully and fiercely in alignment with what is true. And when you stay too long in places that contradict your essence, you don't just waste time, you begin to lose yourself, one compromise at a time, one silence too many. Until eventually, the version of you that was once alive becomes a ghost walking familiar halls. To walk away is to reclaim those forgotten pieces. It means choosing discomfort over dishonesty, uncertainty over spiritual decay. It means choosing you not selfishly, but reverently. And yes, others might not understand. They might question, criticize, misunderstand your silence as weakness. But that's the thing about inner freedom, it doesn't need explanation. The Stoic doesn't walk away impulsively. They walk away deliberately. Because after enough reflection, there comes a point where staying would be the real betrayal. So when you choose to leave without rage, without spectacle, without even needing to be right, that is not weakness. That is the soul whispering, "I will not abandon myself just to make others comfortable." That is the deepest act of self-respect, the quietest kind of courage, the kind that says, "I choose peace, I choose integrity, I choose to honor what I know is right." This is the kind of strength the Stoics revered, not explosive, not boastful, but grounded, steady, soul-liberating. The kind that doesn't ask permission, only truth. The kind that walks through uncertainty with clarity, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. So take a moment right now, look inward, ask yourself, what are you holding on to that feels heavy? What in your life are you staying in out of love, but out of fear? Fear of loneliness. Fear of regret. Fear of judgment. If your answer is fear, maybe it's time to walk. And if it is, know this, that first step will not be the end. It will be your beginning. Chapter 3, Seneca's Silence. When the soul grows quiet. There are moments in life when the world grows loud, yet your soul grows silent. Not from fear, not from defeat, but from a quiet knowing that something essential is missing. Seneca knew this silence well. In the later years of his life, as he navigated the treacherous landscape of Nero's court, he began to sense something shift. Once a man of influence and philosophical clarity, Seneca found himself surrounded by compromise, manipulation, and moral decay. What had once been a noble platform became a prison dressed in luxury. And it was in that tension between outer prestige and inner dissonance that he wrote one of his most profound lines. "Sometimes, even to live is an act of courage." That wasn't just poetry. It was the naked truth of a man feeling the quiet collapse of a life no longer in alignment. The decay wasn't external, it was internal, and he could feel it. This is where the Stoic lesson begins. When your soul grows quiet, listen. Not casually, not with distraction in the background, but with reverence. The soul does not fall silent for no reason. That quiet is a signal, a subtle, sacred invitation to return to what matters. It does not scream, it whispers. And the whisper says, something here no longer fits. Something here has expired. And yet, in a world obsessed with noise, performance, and approval, silence is often misinterpreted as weakness. The Stoics knew better. They saw silence not as absence, but as presenza, deep alignment with one's values that requires no justification. Silence is not withdrawal, it's recalibration. It's not a retreat from life, it's a turning inward to rediscover what's worth living for. Seneca didn't rage against the system. He didn't post declarations or stage a rebellion. He did something far more radical. He began to withdraw not from duty, but from self-betrayal. He started to say no quietly, to choose solitude over spectacle, and to honor clarity over compliance. And in that sacred quiet, he wrote, not for Nero, not for the crowd, but for those who, like him, would one day need courage to walk away. That silence became his forge. In it, he refined his wisdom. His letters crafted away from the noise, away from corruption outlived empires. They spoke not just to scholars, but to every person who's ever stood at the edge of a chapter wondering, is it time to go? Here's what the Stoics would tell you. When joy becomes labor, when passion becomes performance, when meaning dissolves into maintenance, that is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign that the soul is shifting direction, and you must be still enough to feel it. This friction you feel, it's not random, it is sacred. It is the compass nudging you away from what's familiar and toward what is true. It doesn't demand panic, it calls for presence. Let's be honest, listening to that silence is hard, especially when the people around you benefit from your staying, when culture praises perseverance at any cost. When walking away means risking misunderstanding, even condemnation. But Seneca teaches us that peace is not found in applause. It's found in alignment. His retreat from power was not an escape. It was a return, a homecoming to self. And in that space, he became not less, but more human, more whole, more free. Walking away then is not about quitting. It's about recognizing when a role, a relationship, or a rhythm no longer fits your essence. It's about having the clarity to step out of what is crumbling and into what is calling. And yes, that often means letting go before the world gives you permission. Seneca chose stillness over status, solitude over obligation, truth over comfort. And in doing so, he gave us more than philosophy. He gave us a living example of how to walk away with grace. So ask yourself, where in your life has the spark gone dim? Where does your energy feel drained instead of ignited? Not every fire ends in flames. Some fade softly beneath routines, expectations, and roles we've long outgrown. The silence you're feeling, it's not punishment. It's an invitation. It says, "Thank you for what was. Now let us grow into what could be." To heed that call is not to flee, it is to free. It is to step off the stage and return to authorship. To no longer act out the script written by fear or habit, but to write again from truth. Because true life is not static, it flows. And when the soul grows quiet, it's not ending something. It's asking, are you still aligned with who you were meant to be? If the answer is no, then the time has come, not to shout, not to beg, but to walk away. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Not toward emptiness, but toward essence. Keep a journal this week, not of your thoughts, but of your energy. Where do you feel vibrant? Where do you feel diminished? When the same space consistently drains your light, perhaps your soul has already decided. All that's left is for you to follow. Chapter 4. Detachment is not indifference. There's a dangerous misunderstanding that continues to shadow Stoic philosophy. The idea that detachment equals apathy, that if you detach, you cease to care. But nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics weren't cold, they were clear. Their clarity didn't numb their humanity. It sharpened it, purified it. They didn't suppress emotion, they shaped it. They didn't run from love or beauty or passion, they simply refused to be ruled by it. To the Stoic, detachment is not disengagement, it's discernment. It's not turning away from life, but standing fully within, I-anchored, aware, awake. It's the ability to love deeply without being consumed, to feel richly without losing center. Detachment means you can hold someone's hand without trying to hold their fate. One connects, the other controls. To detach is not to stop carrying it, is to stop clinging. It is to see clearly that nothing lasts, and yet to love it anyway. That is not indifference, that is spiritual maturity. It is the ability to be fully present, yet not imprisoned by any moment. To give your heart to the dance of life without chaining yourself to a single rhythm. The Stoics didn't ask us to love less. They asked us to love wisely, to love without possession, without illusion, without the desperate need for things to stay the same. They taught us to hold life with open hands, not clenched fists, because clenched fists cannot receive. Marcus Aurelius said, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny." He wasn't preaching passive submission. He was reminding us that resistance to reality breeds suffering, that when life begins to shift, our grip must soften. If we cling too tightly to the familiar despite its decay, we transform guidance into grief. We turn transition into torment. Detachment, in the Stoic light, is what allows us to walk away not in bitterness, but in honor. To say, I leave not because I reject this, but because I must honor something deeper. It's a commitment to truth over comfort, a choice to carry the lessons without carrying the weight. Detachment reframes our past not as failure, but as fertilizer. Not with regret, but reverence. It lets us bow, softly and sincerely, to what once was. And then, just as gracefully, turn toward what now must be. It acknowledges that every chapter has its time, and that clinging to what is fading only delays our growth. In detachment, there is elegance. There is humility. There is the soft but certain voice of the soul saying, "Thank you, but it's time." Detachment isn't erasure, it's transformation. It doesn't deny the love that was. It refines it. It allows us to walk away with gratitude, not grudge, with strength, not stubbornness, with clarity, not confusion. And in doing so, we reclaim our energy from what no longer resonates and return it to the life that still awaits us. True detachment is not a wallet, is a door. It doesn't shut life out. It opens the way to deeper, truer living. It's the soul's gentle boundary that says, "This served its purpose. Now let me serve mine." It's not resignation, it's reverence. This kind of letting go is not born from defeat. It is devotion. Devotion to the truth of who you are. Devotion to the alignment that nourishes your spirit. Devotion to the quiet wisdom that says, you don't need to cling to something to honor it. Sometimes the greatest act of love is release. Because in that release, we don't lose way, return. Return to presence. Return to clarity. Return to the voice within that never stopped whispering. There's more for you, but you have to let go to receive it. Each morning, take one small object, something meaningful but non-essential, a photograph, a piece of jewelry, your phone. Look at it and gently remind yourself, I may not have this tomorrow, and that's okay. It's a small ritual of release, a daily training in non-attachment, a way to keep the hands of your heart open. Because only when your hands are open can you catch the next wave life brings. Chapter 5. The Fear of the Unknown and Why It's Lying to You. Here lies one of the most powerful illusions we face in life. The idea that staying in discomfort is somehow safer than stepping into the unknown. Most people don't consciously choose misery, but they do choose familiarity, and often those two walk hand in hand. We become fluent in a kind of quiet suffering. We know how to navigate the tension, the disappointment, the dull ache. And strangely, that familiarity becomes its own kind of comfort. At least we know the rules. At least we know the rhythm. But what if that familiarity is the very thing stealing your peace? We rationalize staying by telling ourselves it's responsible, that it's just a phase, that it's not so bad. We convince ourselves that leaving would be impulsive, irrational, too risky. And so we stay in the job, the relationship, the city, the pattern, because at least it's known. But Stoicism challenges that narrative at its root. It tells us that fear of the unknown is rarely about danger. It's about control, and it's often a lie dressed up as wisdom. Fear is a storyteller, a dramatic one. It knows how to paint vivid worst-case scenarios. You'll be alone forever, you'll regret it, you'll fail. And yet, when we shine light on those fears, when we actually examine them instead of just reacting to them, we find that most are built on sand, not stone. Epictetus said it best, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." The pain isn't in the walking away. The pain is in the story we tell ourselves about what walking away means. I'll never find better. I'm too old to start again. I failed. These aren't truths. They're insecurities disguised as certainties. And yet we cling to them, not because they're true, but because they're familiar. The Stoics invite us to do something radically different, to sit with our fear, to look it in the eye and ask, is this real or is this imagined? Because more often than not, fear dissolves under the weight of reason. It loses its shape when we expose it to daylight. And what's left behind isn't terror, it's clarity. Ask yourself, What if leaving opens the door to peace instead of pain? What if solitude is not emptiness, but space to rediscover your essence? What if you're not walking away from your life, but walking toward it? Fear wants you to see change as chaos, but Stoicism teaches us to see change as refinement, as alignment, as truth finally catching up to courage. The unknown is not your enemy, it's your invitation. A sacred place where possibility lives. A blank page, not a void. And if you still feel paralyzed, try this. Write down the worst case scenario. Be specific. Then write the best case scenario. Then write what's most likely. See it on paper. Let your mind witness how fear exaggerates, how it stretches possibility into catastrophe. What you'll find is that fear thrives in vagueness, but loses power in precision. This practice trains your mind to pause before panic, to trade assumption for awareness, to choose curiosity over control. Because behind every brave decision to walk away is a moment of quiet knowing, a whisper from the soul that says, I may not know where this leads, but I know I cannot stay here. And that is enough. That is your compass. You don't need to see the entire map. You just need to trust the next step. So when the fear returns sanded, don't try to erase it. Understand it, then walk anyway. Not recklessly, but intentionally. Not with blind hope, but with eyes wide open. This is the Stoic leap. Not a fall into chaos, but a rise into truth. Into the life that has been quietly calling your name from the edges of your comfort zone. Not louder, but clearer. And when you answer that call, you'll discover something remarkable. The unknown wasn't waiting to harm you. It was waiting to welcome you. Now take out a journal. On one page, write down what your fear is trying to protect. On the other, write down what your soul is asking you to pursue. Then ask, which voice do I want to guide my life? Let that answer shape your next step. Chapter 6. Walking away in relationships. The highest act of love. This is the hardest one to talk about. The moment we realize that love real, deep, sincere love might also mean letting go. Most people equate love with staying, with fighting through, with holding on at any cost. But the Stoics, they saw something much more nuanced. They didn't see relationships as cages to endure or medals to collect. They saw them as opportunities for growth, for virtue, for presence, but never for possession. They understood a truth that many of us run from, that everything in life, including the people we love the most, is borrowed, temporary, a gift, and all that is borrowed must eventually be returned. So to love well, they said, is to be ready to release, not because love ends, but because its form changes. Love, to the Stoic, was not about proximity or permanence. It wasn't about controlling the outcome or clinging to shared history. It was about clarity, about seeing the other person clearly, without illusion. It was about witnessing, not owning, uplifting, not entrapping. Love, in its highest form, was about virtue, not just how you felt, but how you acted. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love, not to possess, not to cling, not to lose yourself trying to hold on." That is the Stoic definition of love, a quiet, sacred attention. A love that says, I see you not as something to complete me, not as someone I need to fix, but as a soul walking its own path. And if that path no longer walks beside mine, I will not grip tighter. I will bow. I will honor what was. True love in this light means letting the other become fully themselves seven, if that journey takes them away from you. The Stoics would never ask, how can I make them stay? Instead, they would ask, am I still living in alignment with my virtue? And if the answer is no, if the relationship causes you to shrink, to hide, to betray your truth, then love requires a harder act. Not endurance, not pleading, but release. We are taught that staying equals loyalty. But there is nothing loyal about abandoning yourself for the comfort of another. There is no courage in staying silent when your soul is screaming. There is no virtue in pretending everything is okay when deep down you know it isn't. Staying when love has soured becomes less about love and more about fear. Fear of change, fear of loneliness, fear of the unknown. But the Stoics would remind us, fear is not a compass. And staying out of guilt is not noble its neglect of the self, of the other, of truth. To walk away doesn't mean the love disappears. It means it has evolved from a flame to an ember, from urgency to wisdom. It means you no longer confuse attachment with affection. You stop mistaking obligation for devotion. And in that choice to release, not out of anger, but out of clarity, you become something stronger. You become someone who remembers with grace, who honors the past, even while choosing a different future, who can say with a full heart, what we shared mattered, but I will not stay in something that requires me to abandon myself. This is not bitterness. This is not rebellion. It is reverence. Reverence for the soul's growth. Reverence for the beauty of what once was. Reverence for the peace that comes when you walk away not because you gave up, but because you woke up. And in walking away, you give the other person a gift too. You give them the space to evolve, the silence to reflect, the dignity of not being needed for completion. Love doesn't always look like holding hands. Sometimes it looks like open palms, like a gentle nod across distance, like a quiet blessing sent to someone you no longer speak to. It is not the volume of your presence that proves love, it is the integrity with which you release it. So if you're in a relationship that feels heavy, confusing, or misaligned, ask yourself with courage, is this calling me toward my virtue or dragging me into my vices? Am I growing or am I fading? And if the answer is fading, then ask yourself one more thing. What would it look like to live not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with gratitude? Gratitude for what they taught you. Gratitude for how they helped you grow. Gratitude for the mirror they held up, even if it reflected pain. Sometimes the highest act of love is letting go so both people can walk freely into their next becoming. And in doing so, you discover that real love never ends. It simply changes shape. Chapter 7. Career Crossroads. Purpose over prestige. This is where many silently break, at the intersection between success and meaning. A moment arrives not loudly, but like a subtle tension in the chest when the career you once chased so passionately no longer feels like a calling. It feels like a costume. And the applause that once lifted you now feels hollow. The Stoics knew this tension well. They reminded us that our job is not our identity. It's a role, not a reflection of our worth. A tool, not a truth. Marcus Aurelius was emperor. Seneca, a statesman and playwright. Epictetus, born into slavery. Different roles, but their essence unchanged, because their worth was never in what they did, it was in who they were. Seneca didn't anchor his peace in prestige. He anchored it in ethical clarity. Marcus didn't confuse his title with his soul. He treated his role as emperor not as entitlement, but as duty. And Epictetus, bound in chains, spoke with more freedom than kings because he had mastered the only domain that truly matters, himself. Their lives all teach one thing. Purpose is internal. It cannot be found in a nameplate, a job title, or a six-figure income. It emerges from alignment, from the question, does this still reflect who I am? Because there comes a time when what once felt like self-expression begins to feel like armor, a shield you wear not to connect, but to defend. It may protect you from judgment, but it also silences your truth. The role that once gave you meaning begins to weigh you down. You perform, you please, you show up, but not as yourself. You show up as the persona you built to survive. And slowly, silently, your soul starts to whisper, "This isn't me anymore." But we keep going because we're praised for commitment, for endurance, for being reliable. But no one asks at what cost. No one sees the exhaustion that comes from living a life too small for who you've become. You smile in meetings while your spirit sighs behind your eyes. You hit deadlines, but miss yourself. You get the raise, but lose the reason you started. You feel safe, but no longer alive. This is what the Stoics warned against. Becoming a prisoner in golden chains. Chains that glitter, chains that open doors, chains that impress your parents or your peers. But chains nonetheless. The praise feels good. The recognition strokes the ego. But deep inside, something aches, because you know you're not showing up whole. You're showing up hollow. The Stoic, in contrast, refuses to be defined by a title. They choose alignment over applause. They ask, "Does my work reflect my values, sir, just my fears? Am I climbing a ladder because it fulfills me or because I'm afraid to start over?" These are not easy questions, but they are the only ones that lead us back to truth. Because when we work only for prestige, we lose the purity of presence. We become actors playing out someone else's version of success. We confuse momentum with meaning, and we mistake being seen for being whole. The Stoics sees through this illusion. They know that integrity is worth more than income, that showing up fully is worth more than showing off loudly. That real freedom is found not by escaping work, but by choosing it with intention. Even within systems others call cages, the Stoic walks free. Because their compass isn't public opinion, it's inner conviction. True success, in this worldview, is not about climbing higher. It's about going deeper. Not about titles earned, but about character preserved. It's asking at the end of the week, did I act with virtue? Did I stay true to myself? Because that's the only success that actually sustains. And here's the truth that most avoid. Sometimes the hardest move is not climbing higher, but stepping aside. Sometimes growth is not up but out. Leaving the job, the industry, the identity, because your soul has already outgrown it. And staying would mean shrinking. In those moments, the Stoic doesn't panic. They pause. They reflect. They choose not from fear, but from fidelity to what is honest, to what is whole, to what is aligned. So ask yourself this week, what part of your work made you feel most alive? What part made you wither? Those aren't random feelings, they're signals. They're compass points. Follow what expands you. Release what shrinks you. Don't wait for burnout to force the exit. Walk with clarity. Leave with calm. And build a life that reflects the truth, not the role you were born to live. Because you were never meant to wear your job like a mask. You were meant to carry it like a torchbright, purposeful, and true. Chapter 8. The Practice of the Exit. How to Leave Well. There is a way to leave that brings peace. A way to close the chapter not with drama, but with dignity. A way to walk away without looking back, not because you're numb, but because you've already made peace with what's behind you. Leaving is not just an action. It is a practice, an inner ritual. And like all things Stoic, it demands intention, discipline, and grace. We often think leaving must come with a speech, a final confrontation, a dramatic final act. But the Stoic knows true power lies not in the volume of your exit, but in the clarity behind it. The way you walk away tells the world, more importantly, it tells yourself who you are becoming. The Stoic doesn't leave in anger. They don't slam doors. They don't destroy bridges. They don't let bitterness poison the ground they once stood on. No. They leave cleanly with honor, with reverence, with full awareness of why it's time to go. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That applies not just to action, but to departure. So when you leave, do so with truth, not spite, with strength, not reaction. Don't walk away just to prove a point or punish others for misunderstanding you. Walk away because you've outgrown the space, because the ground beneath you can no longer hold your roots, and because your soul is now seeking deeper soil. And yes, there will be pain. Of course there will. Pain is not failure. It is the echo of something that once mattered. It's proof that you were fully present, that you invested, that you cared. Pain doesn't discredit the path, it honors it. But pain doesn't mean you should stay. Pain is not a chain. It's a signal. And when you listen, when you trust the whisper over the noise, when you choose your own alignment over someone else's expectations, that's when your exit becomes sacred. The Stoic does not chase comfort. They chase clarity. And clarity will often demand uncomfortable choices. Because true peace is not found in staying quiet or playing nice. It's found in choosing authenticity, even when it hurts. Leaving well doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you don't let feelings drive the exit. You let principle drive it. You let your highest self take the wheel, not your wounded one. And even if no one understands 7, if they think you're cold or impulsive or wrong, it doesn't matter. Because the Stoic knows, approval is not the compass, virtue is. And here's something important. You don't need to hate something to leave it. You don't need to burn it down or erase it. You can leave with love, with gratitude, with softness. You can bow, not slam the door. You can say, "Thank you. I'm different now. I need something else." Every step you've taken, good or bad, has shaped you, and that deserves respect. Even the paths that hurt you contributed to your wisdom. Even the roles you've outgrown once gave you shelter. You're not walking away because it was meaningless. You're walking away because you've learned the meaning it had. And now, that lesson is complete. So don't leave in haste. Don't leave in vengeance. Leave like someone who is evolving. Leave like someone who knows who they are becoming. That's the Stoic way. A quiet, steady departure that doesn't seek applause, but radiates peace, that doesn't justify itself, but feels honest in the body, that doesn't demand recognition, because it already carries its own reward. And what is that reward? Freedom. Not the freedom of recklessness or escape, but the deeper kind. The freedom of alignment, the freedom of walking with yourself instead of against yourself. The freedom of no longer clinging to what you know you've outgrown. So here's a ritual. Before you leave anything, a job, a relationship, a season of your life, sit down and write a letter of gratitude. Don't send it. Just write it. Name what you learned. Name how it shaped you. Thank it for what it gave you. And then close the page. That simple act turns the exit into something sacred. It transforms walking away into a return, not just a return to yourself, but a return to wholeness. You are not abandoning anything. You are stepping forward, finally, into the life that is asking to begin. Chapter 9, The Stoic Art of Release. There is a kind of wisdom that sharpens the moment you begin to contemplate the inevitable, your own death. Not in despair, not in fear, but in clarity. The Stoics didn't meditate on mortality to darken their days. They did it to illuminate their lives, to remind themselves that every attachment, every title, every moment, no matter how precious, is fleeting. And if it is fleeting, it must be held lightly. Memento mori, remember you will die, not to frighten the spirit, but to awaken it. Seneca once wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day." He wasn't urging panic. He was inviting presence. A kind of readiness not for doom, but for release. This is where the true Stoic art of letting go begins. In the understanding that all we cling to will, eventually, slip through our hands. So better to meet that moment prepared, with open palms and a quiet mind. Death, to the Stoics, was the ultimate teacher of detachment. It was the great clarifier. It asked the only question that truly matters. If this were your final day, would you still be doing what you're doing now? Would you still be in that job, that room, that relationship? Would you still be fighting for that approval? Still arguing to be understood? Still tolerating something that quietly erodes your peace? If the answer is no, then what exactly are you waiting for? The Stoic knows every act of walking away is a rehearsal for dying well. It is a small goodbye that prepares you for the ultimate one. And if you can't let go now, in the little things, how will you ever be ready when the final letting go arrives? Walking away, then, is not weakness. It's training. It's a spiritual practice, a ritual of release. It teaches you how to close your hand and open your heart at the same time, how to say thank you and goodbye in the same breath, how to loosen your grip not out of apathy, but out of reverence. Because the truth is, you never truly own anything, you only borrow it. Your time, your roles, your relationships. They are all on loan from the universe. And if you forget that, you begin to cling. And clinging, the Stoics warned, always leads to suffering. So how do you let go? You start with awareness. You begin by asking, what am I holding on to that no longer holds me back? What am I gripping out of fear, not love? Then you act. You walk away not with anger, not with regret, but with a bow. You exit not because you hate what you're leaving, but because you love yourself enough to grow. And what you'll notice is this. The moment you truly release something, your spirit lifts, your breath deepens, your mind clears. That heaviness you've carried quietly begins to dissolve. Because in every release, you reclaim a piece of your own freedom. Freedom not just from a job or a person or a role, but from the fear that kept you tied to it. From the illusion that you couldn't live without it. From the belief that something temporary was your only anchor. Letting go is not just about what you leave behind. It's about what you make space for. Peace, clarity, renewal. So ask yourself tonight, before you sleep, if I don't wake tomorrow, am I proud of how I lived today? Not what you accomplished, not how much you earned, but whether you lived in alignment, whether you honored your truth, whether you walked away when it was time, or stayed out of fear. Let that question guide your next steps. Let it shape how you love, how you work, how you leave, and how you live. Because the Stoics knew, when you walk through life ready to release, you don't become cold, you become free. Chapter 10. Staying Gone. The Discipline of Presence. Leaving is only half the battle. The quieter, harder half often ignored is staying gone. And that's where the real discipline begins. Because once you've walked away from something that hurt, something that drained you, something you outgrew, there's a voice inside that doesn't go quiet. It whispers in moments of stillness. It replays the highlights. It softens the edges of old pain. And suddenly, what once felt unbearable begins to feel almost tender. The tension becomes nostalgia. The distance becomes longing. And the reasons you left start to feel less urgent. This is where many fall, not because the past has changed, but because memory has. We forget the nights we cried ourselves to sleep. We forget the weight of walking on eggshells. We forget how small we had to become just to keep the peace. And we remember only the warmth, the laughter, the parts that once made it worth it. But nostalgia lies. And the Stoic knows this. The Stoic disciplines their memory the way they discipline their thoughts. With honesty, with clarity, with a sacred refusal to romanticize what once robbed them of peace. They say to themselves, I left for a reason, and that reason still stands. Because staying gone is not about bitterness. It's about boundaries. It's not about closing your heart. It's about keeping your soul intact. The Stoic does not allow longing to rewrite history. They don't let temporary loneliness repaint the past in golden hues. They recall not just the good moments, but the cost of staying, the tension, the exhaustion, the erosion of self-worth that came drip by drip until they barely recognized who they were. They replay the whole truth, not just the highlight reel. The sleepless nights, the silent days, the way joy became rare and anxiety became routine. Because that's what presence requires. Full honesty. To stay gone is to honor your growth. It's to say, I'm not going back to who I had to be just to survive that space. Even if that space calls to you, even if it now looks cleaner, softer, more inviting. The Stoic sees through the illusion. They understand that even the most polished doorway can still lead back into a room that once broke them, no matter how it's been redecorated, no matter how warm the welcome now seems. Because if nothing has changed, it's still the same trap. So instead of walking back into a past they've outgrown, the Stoic practices presence, deep, deliberate presence. They don't just move their body forward, they bring their mind, their heart, their spirit with them. They root into the now, into the person they are becoming, not the person they had to be to survive what came before. And that presence is powerful. It's what protects them when doubt arises. It's what steadies them when the nights get quiet. Because yes, leaving hurts. And yes, there will be moments when it feels like maybe you made a mistake. But the Stoic doesn't confuse silence with failure. They don't confuse emptiness with wrongness. They understand. Silence is not a void. It's space. Space to breathe. Space to become. Space to rebuild what was once neglected in the name of comfort or connection. To stay gone is not stubbornness. It's spiritual resilience. A vow to never again abandon your truth for the illusion of belonging. And that disciplinate's not loud. It doesn't need validation. It whispers firmly. Even if no one understands why I left, I do, and that is enough. The world may try to lure you back into roles you've outgrown, back into patterns that once drained you, back into places where you had to hide your fullness to be accepted. But the Stoic knows you owe the world nothing if it cost you your integrity. What you do owe is to yourself, to your growth, to your unfolding, to the soul that now walks taller because you finally stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that couldn't contain you. Growth is not always visible. Sometimes it happens quietly, beneath the surface, like roots stretching wide and deep. But you feel it. You feel it in the steadiness of your breath, in the way you speak without apology, in the way your heart no longer flinches at your own truth. This is presence. Not just being in a new place, but being new in it. Not carrying old pain like armor. Not peeking back through the door you already closed. But walking forward with your head held high, knowing this step is for you. And when the mind tries to pull you back, when doubt creeps in, the Stoic returns to the present, not the past. They remind themselves, the path ahead is unknown, yes, but the path behind is already known. And it led them to suffering. That's why they stay gone. Because leaving was never about quitting. It was about beginning. Beginning again. Beginning in truth. So if you've walked away from something, stay gone. Not out of pride, but out of purpose. Not because you hate what you left, but because you finally love who you're becoming. And each step you take anchored in presence, lit by clarity, held by self-respect, is a declaration. I'm not going back, because I finally know who I am without it. And so, they carry not bitterness, not regret, but wisdom. A wisdom earned in silence, carried with grace, and shaped not by the comfort they returned to, but by the fire they chose to walk through. And in that fire, they forged something priceless. A deeper self, a clearer path, a quieter kind of strength. This is the quiet triumph of those who walk away and never look back. Not out of anger, not to prove anything, but because peace is found not in fixing what was, but in honoring who you've become. So set a daily reminder, not just on your phone, but in your heart. You left for a reason. honor it. Let those words steady you. Let them hold you firm when memory tries to rewrite the past. Let them remind you that staying gone isn't about isolation, it's about integrity. And if this journey resonated with you, if it gave you the clarity or the calm you didn't know you were searching for, don't let it stop here. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who may be standing at their own crossroads, silently wondering if it's time to walk away too. Leave a comment below with the words, "I choose presence." Let it be your vow to stay loyal to your path. Let it be your way of marking this chapter of beginning again, not with fear, but with full-hearted truth. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking this path of strength, stillness, and self-respect. And remember, you're not walking away from something. You're walking towards something far more real. Yourself. I'll see you in the next video.